All right. I'm JT McMahon. We'll be taking us through the webinar here today on reference templates new to Civil 3D 2018. As a webinar, I will do my best to answer any questions that come in. So if something isn't clear in my presentation, go ahead and type it and I will try to get to those as I see them roll in. So I think that one thing in Civil 3D that can be, maybe difficult to manage or a pain point in the software at times would be how styles affect everything and managing those styles. So one thing, an example of this would be having a style in different templates. So for this reason, a lot of companies and a lot of people will try to really just narrow down their templates because it's a hassle that if you ever have to make a change, if you have your different styles referenced in multiple different locations, then you have to change it and you have to open each of those locations and make the change and remember all of the places where that style existed in the first place. Another pain being that when you do make a style change in a template, say, maybe your CAD manager and your users come to you and they say, hey, this style isn't really working for us. We need it to work more like this, or maybe you're asking people what changes they're constantly making and realize that you need to make a change to something. Well, how do you then get that out to everybody that's actively working on projects? That's going to be a bit of a hassle as well. And then finally, one of the pain points can be you have all sorts of different clients that you may work with, and sometimes they get really picky that, hey, I really want to see this looking this specific way. And so you might end up having to build styles just for different clients, and then you're kind of can make your templates larger. We're going to talk about how this new tool here in 2018 kind of helps to alleviate all these different challenges. So what is it? What is it that we're talking about here, other than just simply a new button from the styles palette here? As you can see on my right side of the screen, I have the import and the purge on there, which some of you may be familiar with already. There's this new reference button. And what it does is it allows us to reference a style in a similar way to XREFing a style almost from one drawing or template into a different drawing or template. So those of you that are familiar with the import, it's similar to that in that you're going to browse out to something else and you're going to say, hey, take the styles in that drawing and bring it into this drawing. The nicer part about reference, though, is that when you do make that styles update or change, it's going to apply to the drawings that it's been referenced into, like in XREF, right? And you do have some control as to what actually comes through in the reference as well. It's not just necessarily going to be everything from that drawing. So why use templates? Well, kind of to answer some of the problems that we opened up with. So you can single source your styles so that you don't have to make the change to the style in all locations. If you have something like a contour label perhaps, I mean that's something that's going to need to be in most of your templates. If you have surfaces and being built off of that template, then you need that style. Well, maybe you want to have one standard contour label style, but if you decide to change it, now you have to push that change to everywhere. Maybe the font or whatever it is changed. Now you have to open up each place where that is and change it. Not with a single source, you don't have to. You can more easily apply the standards to the project level so that the projects, because they were built off of those templates in the first place, or they were just being referenced later on, like all of those changes are coming into the projects. And then you can actually have different templates. So maybe even for some of those of you who have more polished setups out there, maybe consider having even a specific template with styles built in it for individual clients. So now maybe I take those few styles that I had for my different clients out of my main template, and I can have them in their own template and reference them only when I want, or only when I'm doing projects with those clients on it. That's going to kind of take down my list in that base template, which is pretty nice. Yeah, I just kind of go through those all again, so we get that single sourcing, make the change in one location, company standards. One kind of thing I want to highlight here as well is that when you do make a standard style change, you can, for all the users, it makes it a lot easier for them to not have to worry about changing a style. You don't have to send out an email and say, well, for all of you, those of you who are doing it, you're using this style, we made a change it like this. Like, they don't even have to worry about it. You don't even maybe have to tell them that it changed. It'll just start working on their machine that the change will be applied. Likewise, that is nice for the client-based styles, that if you have it set up in a convenient way for them, then when they start a drawing and say maybe it's a specific city that you're working with, and this city engineer likes to see a spot elevation label in a particular manner, you can have that style brought in, maybe even replace other standard style, and not have to worry, that the end user wouldn't even have to worry about which one to use. It's just going to look like the normal one for them to use, and that's going to be kind of just a good way for your managers and your power users to have things set up for the users that aren't as familiar with Civil 3D and might not be, or maybe are just simply new to the company and not knowing which styles to use. All right. So I think I'm going to jump into the software here, and let's actually start to look at some of those things that are going on. So this drawing was kind of built off of, say, a template where I didn't have all my styles. I just kind of want to show here, kind of walk through the referencing of a style. So I'm going to go right to my managed page up top. Click on reference here. That's where I get my little plus to attach in a new template or a drawing. I'm going to use a template. Maybe I'll use the general template. Maybe this is our kind of our company standard template that has things that the entire company will use. I'll bring that in and hit update. It has a whole lot to bring in. And once that's all come through, if I look at my styles here under settings, let me look at alignment styles, for example. You'll notice that I have several of these styles. In fact, all these styles have a little logo here. This is something that's unique, right? This means that they are referenced styles. So now I could take my alignments in the drawing, not my surface, but they're my alignments here, and use one of those styles. Perhaps layout is what I would want to use here. Just kind of a good example of, you can see here where I brought in styles and I was able to use them right away, right? So that's kind of the way to go about it. Another example that I was going to use here would be, say I had a specific client template here. I'm going to bring in my client template, and actually I'm going to come in here and click my Manage Reference Settings. And you can see here where I don't need to have everything checked. I think this answers one of the questions that came in here, that if I say I don't want to bring in all the layers from my template, I can just uncheck the layers so that it won't necessarily bring in every layer. Now, of course, if there are things that are built into styles, it's still going to come through, but it's not going to bloat this drawing with what I don't need. In fact, if I know that I'm really only after one thing, say I'm after something in my surface, and I'm after a label style in my surface, maybe I'll just reference everything from a surface in that template. I can actually unselect the other objects that are in here. You'll see blocks and different styles and line types as well. And if you're using property sets, I don't think I have any, but if you're using property sets, that all comes through. So Autodesk has done a really nice job in being considerate here, allowing us to specify what it is that we actually want to be referencing back and forth. So I'll click OK here. Click the update button. In the lower right corner, you see that I'm importing resources. And then don't worry about those errors that pop up. And now when I go to add a label here, I have a spot elevation. This is the style that came through that I wanted to use, elevation with box. I'm going to add this to my surface, and maybe that, maybe this was a unique way that somebody wanted to see them with the box around it. Drag state and all this, I could have no leader and things like that. So just an example of bringing through a custom custom label and having that show up properly. Okay, so now I'm going to open up the template that I would use here to reference called General. I'll click open here, and say it was the my center line type. We decided that this red didn't work well for us perhaps, and we want to make a change to that style. And go ahead and come into my alignments, styles, and change my layout. We're going to edit this one. And just for kind of today's example, I'm just going to do a color override here and maybe a line type override as well. So I've made changes to this style. Click OK. Save my template. Save that. Okay. And come back into my alignment profile. I am going to need to, as I have this drawing open, and I made the change while it's open, I'm going to need to come into the manage here, and you can tell that it's needing to be reloaded. It is smart enough to at least show me that. I'm going to update it. It's importing, and there you can see the style change live on my screen. So it really does work well. Again, this is kind of something that maybe people would ask questions if you did a change, if your end users had, hey, this change, was it supposed to? Yeah, it was. They don't actually have to worry about the change, really. They don't have to import and know which one to import and duplicate, things like that. Now, if for whatever reason, for the specific project that they were working on, they wanted to make a change, let's go through that scenario here. For my alignment styles, I have this layout style being used. I'm going to edit this, and in here, let's say I want this to go back to by layer. Maybe I'll keep the line type and click OK. I get a warning. This dialog box, as you can see here, it's just telling me that it's coming from a reference template. So maybe I'll hit cancel if I'm not sure that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I can make a local copy. So just into this drawing, I could have kind of a copy or something. I'd have to name it a little bit differently. Or I even have the option to apply the edits for just this drawing session. I don't know that this will be the most popular, but if you have people that are having a hard time seeing something a certain way, even though that's the way it needs to be for printing and for the other users, whatever, if they want to change it for the session in which they're working on it, they can apply it for the drawing session only, and then it'll revert back to how it's supposed to look for anyone else that opens the drawing. Just kind of like an extra little, you can customize it for the way that you want to see it option. So I am going to hit cancel. I don't actually want to change it. I want to leave it the way that our company standard is. But just know that that is kind of how that works for those style changes. And actually, I do like that quite a bit, because I'm going to bring up, for those of you who would be the people in your organizations that are managing templates, that say you have a new template that you want to build. So I'm going to come in here, say File, New. I'm going to build a new template. And say I wanted to build it off of the out of the box here template. See Autodesk, or if I could remember where that was off the top of my head. But let me just use one of the templates that I have here for today. If you wanted to build it off of the, say, the ACAD.DWT, I'm just going to use a different template for myself right now. But you could start something off of like an ACAD DWT, which for those of you who don't know, will only have a bare minimum set of styles in it, pretty much everything called standard. I could start building from the ground up. And I would do so by referencing my other templates that already have styles that I know that I'm going to want to duplicate. Whether I want them to look the exact same, I can bring them in and then not worry about them. So say I bring in the general, and I bring in my site design, my road design. Maybe I want a couple things for my survey template. So I bring in all these different templates and hit update, and I'll end up with all of those different styles in here now. And whether I want to keep those references or ultimately unload them later on, I at least have them as an excellent starting point, so that in all of these different areas, we'll go with maybe profiles for this one, that I have all these different profile styles to start with. And maybe I just want to copy it and again, change around layers that are being referenced to whatever it may be, and save those as different copies, name them however you want to name them, and then at the end of the day, unload your references. You'll still have those styles, of course, that you built. So really an awesome tool for anytime you have to start a new template. You just want to start from scratch so that you have things at a more basic level. We have plenty of time here for questions. I do want to just kind of recap here with some of the conclusions about reference templates. They are, again, really an excellent way to single source the styles, right? That's probably the most powerful thing that perhaps we can see coming away with things, that our styles only have to exist in one place. You change that style, it affects everything else. That's awesome. One of the questions that came in here is that questioning about whether the layers are imported into the drawing or just referenced until used. If I open the software back up, that kind of the answer to this goes back to whether or not you chose to import them in the manage referenced settings here. So if I have on my layers tab here, if I have this checked, it is going to import any of the layers that don't already exist in the drawing. But if I uncheck it, it will not import those layers, again, unless they are being referenced by a style. So it is going to bring them in when it's checked, or when you have a style that you've brought in is referencing that layer. But if it's unchecked, then it's not going to bring those layers in. Hopefully that clears that up. Another thing that we saw today during the demo would be that when we changed a style in our source template, can refer to like an XREF of the source template where that style was actually built, it just applies. It works beautifully with all of the different drawings that are referencing that and all the different templates. And then, yeah, I kind of gave the one example where I brought through a template that had this unique kind of, that was the quirky, what I would, at least from, to my eyes, a quirky looking spot elevation label. I was able to bring that through and have that be something as part of this project that I wouldn't necessarily want to have in all of my projects. Another good question that's come through is, are you going to be able to reference, so when in 2019, will you be able to reference things that came from 2018 for updating? So the question's a little bit yes and but. The yes, you will be able to reference the things that came from 2018, but the but being any time that you are referencing something that's old, there's you're always running just a slight chance of it not working. So if there is a different file format, and I don't know yet, it's, we haven't heard whether or not 2019 will be having a new file format or not. Once in a while things might, maybe there's a big change to surfaces, maybe the surface labels won't come through quite correctly. Typically the vast majority of things are going to come through. I just, the but is simply when you're bringing something from an old version into a new version, you just run the chance of it not working exactly the same. At the very worst, though, you could reference your 2018 styles and then like rebuild them, but you kind of know how you had built it the first time, right? So that would be at least worth doing. Another question here was, do command settings come through? Not exactly sure what you mean by command settings. If you could kind of clarify that a little bit, I'd be happy to answer that as well. Here are kind of the list of the different drawing settings that are being referenced. I do not believe that lists and things like that are being okay, so the question being about forced default styles that are being used. So it has to be a style that was referenced, right? So you can't override the styles that already existed in that drawing. I could play around maybe with trying to trick it by naming it the exact same, but again, I don't think you're going to be able to force an override of a style that existed in that drawing by referencing a different style into that drawing. It's going to have to have started out as a reference. It's just going to have to be a reference, unfortunately. So yeah, not necessarily a way to force an override of something that was already in place.